Good evening, crafting friends. I'm Dorene Decibus from It Begins with Ink and Paper, and welcome to Simply Stamping Sunday. I apologize for being late tonight. I actually just left the question and answer portion of the webinar is just going pretty long, so I just put in the chat that I needed to leave and so I could join here. So welcome to week 2 of the Peaceful Evergreens stamp set. Actually, I'm working with the suite, the Peaceful Evergreens stamp set and the Peaceful Season stamp set. And tonight I'm actually adding from the Christmas Labels stamp set. I just couldn't resist this piece on Earth. It goes with these trees so nicely, so I am going to be using that stamp set too. So let me just move that out of the way, and let's just review what we did last week with this set. So we made these 3 cards last week. Just as a reminder of what we did. I thought they came out beautiful using that gorgeous Season of Elegance paper and the stamp set with the trees. I had lots of comments. Hi Bonnie, welcome. I'm glad you were able to wait for me. I had lots of comments that these cards could also be used for masculine cards, and you're absolutely right. You could take and make this a birthday card or another type of card for a man or a woman. Trees are great that way. They can just go for so many people. So tonight we have 3 more cards that we're going to be making. Let me just get everything out of my pouch. I'm glad that I was all set up before the webinar, but I'm taking a bunch of social media classes, and so that's what I was doing while you were waiting. I thought it was they've all been an hour long, and this one was longer, which I wasn't anticipating. So the first card we're going to make tonight is another holiday card, and this is going to be, I'm really focusing on those monochromatic cards tonight. So here's my cherry cobbler card with a little bit of green in it. So they're stamping on the inside and on the outside of the card. So let's get started. So what we need is a piece of 5.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock, in this case the cherry cobbler cardstock. So we're just going to fold that in half, and then we're going to need a piece of 4 by 5.25 piece of basic white to go in the inside, and we'll be stamping that. We're going to need a piece that measures 2.25 by 4.25 piece of white for the front of the card, and we'll be stamping that as well. And then this is just 1/8 of an inch bigger, so it's 2 3/8 by 4 3/8 to go. Oh no, it's 1/4 inch bigger. I'm sorry. It's 2.5 by 4.5. And then I have just a scrap that is 1/4 inch wide and a scrap that is 3/8 of an inch wide for the greeting. And I have a piece of gold brushed foil. I think you can see how it just glimmers in the light. And it measures 5 3/8 by 4 1/8. And then I have 3 pieces of the that measures 1.25 by 5 1/4. All right, and I think I have these lined up. Nope, I had them lined up. There we go, so that I can put them together on the cardstock. Okay, so let's get the front all set, and then we'll do our stamping afterwards. So I cut these at 1/4 inch, so that brings it to 3 3/4 inch, and then that gives me a little bit of room to have a border in between. So what I'm going to do is just grab my Stampin' Seal, and when I do this on anytime I make a card, I start with my 2 outer edge pieces, because then I can make sure I start with my border and I can get these aligned and then put the middle piece in. And the middle piece will then have enough room in between the 2 others. So that's what I'm going to do here, is align them up and then put my middle piece in. This is a type of card you could do with any designer series paper. Just have a background to put it on. I could have even put it directly right on the cherry cobbler, but that measurement of 1 1/4 by 5 1/4 will get you across the front of the card. There we go. So that's the front of the card right there. So we'll put that aside for a minute and let's start our stamping. And I have somewhere a scrap of paper. Let me see where I put it. Oh, it's right here in front of me. Just to put down so I don't get a lot of ink all over. I'm going to be stamping my tree in, oops, I got that a little wet. Let's just take a different one and see. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to take I have a glass of water over here and has ice in it. So of course it's just like weeping. So I'm going to take my large tree and I am going to stamp this on the side and then stamp it again. And then I'm going to use the cherry cobbler to stamp, and I'm going to stamp the tree on the front of this. We'll get the tree all done. There we go. Now we can close the Mossy Meadow ink. And then for the greeting, I am going to use the Love from My Home to Yours in the cherry cobbler. Just going to stamp that right in the center. There we go. And then on the inside of the card, let's see, which one did I use? I used Thinking of You with Warm Feelings and A Wish for All the Merriest. There we go. So that's all the stamping for this one. So this is going to go on the inside of the card. I feel like I come back to my roots of stamping when I'm doing Simply Stamping Sunday, because we just stamp. And now that wasn't my exact roots, because when I first started stamping, I actually was like the heat embossing queen, and everything I did involved heat embossing. I used to go home to my parents and to work on my Christmas cards, and literally it was I would stamp the image, my mother would dust it with the embossing powder, and my father would use my embossing tool to heat emboss it, and we just would have so much fun just making cards, especially when it was around the holidays, and we'd be making our Christmas cards. So that's really my stamping roots, but I love it when I'm just stamping and not using anything else but the stamps and the ink and the paper. And that's what I love about Sundays so much. So I'm just going to add that to the front of the card with dimensionals. And then I am going to take a pair of my snips, and I'm going to just cut at a diagonal on this end and trim a little bit of it off on that end. And get rid of those scraps. I'm going to add some adhesive right down the middle. And then add this, and I'll do the same thing. I'll do some cutting off. There we go. There we go. Our label's done. And I am going to be putting this right across the bottom like that. I'm going to have to put some dimensionals on this end, and because it's already raised, I'm actually going to have to put 2 dimensionals on this end. And then add some adhesive to this end. There we go. And there is our first card for the evening. All right, let's go to our second card. And we're going to be using all Mossy Meadow in this one. This is going to be just a simple gatefold card. And this is what it looks like. So we have wishing you and yours a season of wonder and happiness. And we have the trees on the inside. And this time I didn't stamp off. I stamped both of them full ink. All right, so let's put this one together. So for the stamping, I need a piece of white that measures 4 1/4, 4 1/8 by 2 3/8. I need a scrap of white to stamp my greeting, and I need a piece that measures 4 by 5 1/4. So let's start with stamping the large tree first in the Mossy Meadow. So I want to add a star to the top of this to have just a little bit of a bling of color. So I'm going to make sure I have the tree a little lower than I had in the first card. There we go. And then I'm going to take my crushed curry ink, goes with this, ink that up, and stamp it right on the top. So we have that little star there, and it gives it just that little bit of color. All right. This is going to be mounted on a piece of Mossy Meadow that is 4 1/4 by 2 1/2. And we'll just set this aside. On the inside, we're going to have 2 of those trees. And then we'll ink it up again and have this one just below where it's going to look like a smaller tree. There we go. We've got our 2 trees. On the inside of the card, it says a season of wonder and happiness. So let me get that stamped. There we go. And then finally, we need the greeting. And I did this Friday night. I think I showed this little step that you can take when you have this small stamp that you want to stamp on a smaller piece of paper, you can stamp on a bigger sheet of paper so you can get it right down to the bottom, and then you can take your trimmer and trim it off. So you get it to be the size that you want. And then in this case, I'm even going to trim a little bit off the edges. And that way I end up with a piece of paper that is perfectly centered. And that way I don't have to worry about getting it perfectly centered. I just have to get it straight. Okay. So I'm going to set those pieces aside. I'm also going to be using a piece that measures 3/8 wide to go behind this, and I'll put that on in a minute. And this is going to go in the inside. All right, so to make a gatefold cord, you need a piece of paper that measures 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. And then you're going to score at 2 1/8 to make the gatefold. So I'm just using my paper cutter scoring tool, which I've shown you lots of times on Sundays. There we go. So when I fold these in, because they're 2 1/8, they will meet right in the middle, like that. So you get this perfect fold that closes the card. So I'm going to add this to the inside of the card. There we go. That looks beautiful on the inside with the matching ink. And now these 2 pieces of designer series paper measure 2 inches by 5 3/8. And again, I have them cut so that they match. So this way I'll know which side goes on which. So you get that nice matchup of the designer series paper. So there's our one side, and this side will match right up to it. And I'm just going to make sure I've got them lined up at the same so they're even. And there's the front of our card. So now all I need to do is I want to put this on right in the center. So that means I am going to only add adhesive to this side right here. There we go. So I'm just going to line this up so it's even and press down, and it opens up fine like that. So now let's just get our greeting done. So I'm going to add this right in the middle so it's centered, and grab my snips again. And we'll just trim that off. So we just have a sweet little label. All right, and I'm going to put dimensionals on this to put this across the bottom of the card. There we go. And I'm just going to center this at the bottom. I could have put this anywhere on the card, but I didn't really want to cover up the Christmas tree. I was okay with covering up the bottom because it kind of sticks out at both sides. So that is card number 2. Okay, card number 3 uses the Pretty Peacock, and this is the card that I use the Peaceful on Earth stamp, because I just, oh, these trees are just so peaceful and just, at least they, so this is what the card looks like. Let's get started. It is just all stamping. Oh, and the inside I also have some stamping that I've done as well. Most of the time when people do Christmas cards, they include some kind of printed letter, and so you don't need a lot of room when you go to write in a Christmas card. I usually just write the person's name and my signature, and then if I'm going to say more, I'm going to include a letter. So I've just folded the Pretty Peacock cardstock in half. I'm going to set that aside. What you need for this particular card is a piece of the Designer Series paper that is 2.5 by 5 1/4. You're going to need 2 pieces of 4 by 5 1/4 basic white, one for the front, one for the inside. You're going to need a piece of 5 3/4 by 4 1/8 piece of the Lost Lagoon. I'm just going to have that contrasting color. And then I have a piece of the Pretty Peacock that measures 3 1/4 by 4 1/4. And then this measures 3 1/8 by 4 1/8. Okay, let's get our stamping done first, and then we'll put this card together because it's a real easy card to put together. So let me just get my scrap paper. On the inside of the card, I'm going to be stamping the greeting, wishing you all the things that warm your heart and lift your spirits. And I'm going to be stamping the 2 smaller trees. So, let me just move that out of the way. So I'm going to ink up the taller one of the 2. And I'm going to stamp it and then stamp it off like that. And then I'm going to take the smaller tree and I'm going to stamp it off to the side like that. Then on the inside, I am going to stamp the greeting. Okay, that is all set. This piece here, I'm going to be stamping my little forest image. So I'm going to start with the taller of the two trees, and I am going to stamp it and then stamp off. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, maybe a little higher this time. There we go. And then in the middle, I'm going to stamp the smaller one. And then I am going to stamp off, but I'm going to stamp off on the paper and then stamp up here. There we go. So we've got that just beautiful, nice, serene image. And then I'm going to take my piece on earth and I'm going to stamp it right up here. There we go. Okay, get those all out of the way. Okay, this first piece is going to go inside the car. This is going to go on our layer. Designer series paper is going to go on the piece of basic white. It is the same length as the paper, and I'm going to leave a border of white over here on the side. Just got a little bit sticking over the edge. And then this is going to go on the piece of Lost Lagoon. I felt the ink, when the ink is stamped off, it looks like the Lost Lagoon, and that's why I wanted to just add another subtle piece of color to the card. This will go on to the front of the card. And then this is going to go right here, and I am going to add dimensionals to it. So some pretty simple cards tonight, just using basic stamping and some of the beautiful designer series paper to add that beautiful gold to our images. And we have another week in the books. How pretty is that? I think this one is my favorite. All right, so let's take a look at what we made tonight. So our first card was in the Cherry Cobbler with the brushed gold foil. Our second card is a gatefold card, a simple gatefold card, and uses the Mossy Meadow and the Old Olive. And then our final card tonight used the pretty Peacock, the Lost Lagoon, to make this Peace on Earth card. And all the cards are stamped on the inside, and I think they all came out. I'm happy with all of them, I guess I'll say. This is just another one of those sets that I don't think it matters what you stamp. It's going to be beautiful. So thank you for joining me tonight, even though I was a little late. And I will be back next Friday night for Fun Fold Friday. And of course, I'll be back next Sunday night for another edition of Simply Stamping Sunday. And it will be week 3 of using these sets. So have a wonderful week. Veterans, thank you for your service to our country. And enjoy your day tomorrow. And I will see you Friday night. Good night, everybody.